Welcome to Cardinia Catchment Landcare. I'm hoping to introduce you to some really good work that we've been doing over the last 10 years, and next year is our celebration of 10 years of landcare in Cardinia Catchment. I'm the President, my name is Glen Brooks MacMillan, and I've been fortunate to lead this group for several years now. And we've been undertaking lots of exciting projects that have a lot to do with restoring the environment, but also a lot about connecting communities. And I'm hoping throughout this episode to show you some of those activities that we undertake, but more importantly I'm hoping to share with you some things that maybe you might be interested in getting more involved with, getting more passionate about, and helping some of your fellow neighbours. So aside from your councils, there are also lots of other agencies that work in this area. One, for example, is Melbourne Water, Department of Sustainability Environment, and Parks Victoria. These groups also are undertaking lots of projects either side of Cardinia Creek. One of the main things that Landcare likes to share with its community is that we all live in this beautiful area. We all have our priorities, and we're trying to invite people along to share with us what some of those priorities are. We feel we're privileged to have this platypus in our creek, so we wanted to share with you as well some of the things that we experience when we come across the activities that are along the creek. And for me personally and some other people, to physically touch a platypus is a very, very exciting activity. And I look forward to inviting people in our community to participate in those activities in the future, and hopefully you'll keep in touch with when those events are occurring. But I also wanted to share with you that our program that we're undertaking at the moment has been supported by a grant that we applied for last year. And this grant was specifically targeting to raise the awareness about the platypus, but basically to try and help the community understand this awareness. I felt that working within Landcare, a lot of people understood the importance of looking after the environment for the platypus. But when I go to the shops or talk to people, my neighbours and people outside of Landcare, that awareness just isn't as strong. So we have this project called Conservation of Platypus, and we've added the word community. So it's Community Conservation of Platypus. And so we hope over the next 6 to 12 months, even a little bit longer than that, to try and raise awareness for the community, and especially the part of the community that doesn't have an everyday involvement with Landcare. One of those activities is getting around to schools, and this little mate of ours has been to many schools, parading around, and the children just love it. And we're hoping to have many events along the creek, and also in much more busier areas where maybe people just don't come across the platypus. So welcome to Cardinia Creek. Now this is basically what Cardinia Catchment Landcare is all about. It's about protecting this creek, and what all the activities that we do outside of the catchment eventually comes into this creek. So that's why it's important for us to try and raise awareness about some of the issues, so that people in the local area can start thinking about some of the activities that they could change and possibly improve. So for example, this part of the creek, it's quite common to see dogs and the like coming in here for a swim. But what we find is that the area that the dogs come in starts to become, I guess, full of weeds, as well as the sediment from the soil ends up into the creek. The dogs themselves can impact on the creek, and the platypus at the end of the day just doesn't want to be here. Our surveys have found that platypus don't come down this far, and we'd really like to see that improving over the next few years. So things like litter and obviously dog droppings and the like all impact on the conservation of the platypus. So here I'm standing on a bridge over Cardinia Creek. I've got City of Casey on one side and the Shire of Cardinia on the other. Under me is the creek and the banks, and that area is managed by Melbourne Water. The land on your side of the City of Casey is DSE land. So there's lots of land managers around here, lots of priorities and lots of projects going on. And we're hoping through the Platypus project that we're going to find different ways to manage environment issues on this creek. And I'm hoping these are going to be things that people like myself in Landcare have never thought of before. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you in regards to some of those things. Beaconsfield Business District's probably only 150 metres away from Cardinia Creek. Now this area here behind me is the entrance to Acuna Park on City of Casey side, but also the entrance to the Beaconsfield Conservation Reserve. So there's lots of pressure here for the creek, but we like to work through this project to try and raise awareness and understand what are some of the impacts that we have on the creek so that we can start changing our activities and start improving the way that we look after the creek.
My name's Josh Griffiths. I'm a senior wildlife ecologist for an environmental research organisation called CESAR. One of my main roles is to manage the Melbourne Water Urban Platypus program, which is a large-scale population monitoring program that we've got looking at the status of platypus populations around Melbourne. It's a long-term study, which is one of the, well, pretty much the only study of a long-term study of platypus in an urban area. The main objective is to understand the population trends of platypus in the area, what are the key threats that they're facing, and what can the land managers like Melbourne Water do to help conserve platypus populations. We do rely quite heavily on in-kind contributions from community groups, councils. We quite often have student volunteers come out and help us on surveys, and at the same time they gain field experience, so it's a bit of a two-way street there. And we also quite often take community members out to help them sort of engage with their local environment and understand more about the platypus and what's happening in their local creek. We've just recently sort of put together quite a lot of the data over sometimes up to 17 years in some locations, and unfortunately we've seen some fairly widespread declines of platypus populations around Melbourne. Looks like it's largely due to the long-term drought that we've seen, probably not surprising given that they rely on aquatic ecosystems. And I guess just recently we're starting to see those populations rebound a little bit, which is encouraging, but they're still highly vulnerable at the moment. Some of the key threatening issues that particularly communities can deal with are things like we've had a bit of a recent spate of animals being found entangled in litter. So things like rubber bands, hair ties, fishing line, basically anything that forms an enclosed loop can be potentially fatal to these animals. And unfortunately, there just seems to have been a bit of a run recently of a few animals found dead. Also things like opera house nets, which they are illegal in public waters, but they are still fairly commonly used, and again, they're a death trap for platypus. Also things like controlling their dogs around waterways. We do find that they do get attacked quite often. Not necessarily an aggressive act by the dog, they just tend to play with whatever they can find, and you know, that the platypus tends to come off second best.
My name is Paul. I'm part of the Healthy Waterways Water Watch program at Melbourne Water. I'm a coordinator for the Western Port Catchment. From about 2010, platypus population numbers were quite low as a result of obviously the drought and things like urban development and habitat destruction and things like that. But in recent years, we've seen an increase in numbers, which has been really positive, and that has in part been due to a lot of the work of some of the really great community groups that are out there. The series of community platypus information nights that we're running throughout the Greater Melbourne region are aimed at first to share some of the knowledge of some of the surveying that's been done on platypus numbers in recent times, as well as create some community involvement. So tonight particularly, and some of the other nights, are going to be very much situated around looking at some of the work community groups are doing and discussing some of that and sharing some of that, allowing some opportunity for some networking, as well as encouraging those that aren't involved to take part, because there is some really fantastic stuff happening. I guess one more thing I should add: if you're interested in becoming involved in Water Watch, you can jump on the Melbourne Water website and or look up the Water Watch page and get in touch. I think there are some contact details on there, and you can say g'day, and we can put you in the right direction.
And what we're looking for is your input. We're looking for you to participate in how can you look after the platypus? Not from a Landcare's perspective, but maybe what you can do. Because we understand that everyone lives very busy lives and people have priorities way outside of the scope of what maybe a Landcare person might have. So I'm inviting people to come along, talk to us, come along to events, field days, and please be honest about some of the things that maybe you think you could do to help the platypus. And hopefully together we can share those ideas and build a program over the next few years so that everyone can work in together to conserve the platypus.